Basel was a canton of Switzerland that was in existence between 1501 and 1833, when it was split into the two half-cantons of Basel-City and Basel-Country. Background: before the Protestant Reformation, Basel was ruled by prince-bishops. In the later 15th century, in the wake of the Council of Basel, the city of Basel grew in wealth and importance. The University of Basel was established in 1459, and the city became an intellectual center of the German Renaissance in the years leading up to the Reformation. Erasmus of Rotterdam taught in Basel, and early print shops were set up by Johannes Petri and Johann Froben. In 1495, Basel was incorporated in the Upper Rhenish imperial circle, the bishop sitting on the bench of the ecclesiastical princes. Establishment, as a direct consequence of the Swabian War, resolved by the 1499 Treaty of Basel. Basel and the imperial city of Schaffhausen joined the Swiss Confederation in 1501, as the Confederacy's 11th and 12th states, with Appenzell following suit 12 years later to complete the Dres en Orte that made up Switzerland until the French Revolutionary Wars. The canton of Basel seceded from the prince-bishopric, and the secular rule of the bishops of Basel from this time was limited to territories west of Basel, more or less corresponding to the modern canton of Jura. Even though the bishops of Basel no longer held secular authority over the city of Basel, they continued to reside in the city until the Protestant Reformation. In 1503, the new bishop Christoph von Utenheim refused to give Basel a new constitution, whereupon, to show its power, the city began the construction of a new city hall. The Reformation was brought to Basel by Johannes Oecolampadius, cathedral preacher under von Utenheim and co-editor of Erasmus's first edition of the Greek New Testament. Von Utenheim resigned on the 19th of February 1527. He was succeeded by Philipp von Gundelsheim, canon at Basel-Munster since 1510. In 1529, the city became Protestant under Oecolampadius and the bishop's seat was moved to Porrentruy. In 1530, Laufenthal rebelled against the bishop, but were suppressed using forces from Solothurn. Because of insolvency, the prince-bishopric grew increasingly dependent on the city of Basel, with the city granting him a mortgage on Berwick Castle in 1542, 1544, and 1545. In 1547, the bishop formally agreed to allow the city to choose its own religion, recognizing that the city had already become Protestant. The Basel patriciate now played a pivotal role in city affairs as they gradually established themselves as a de facto city aristocracy. The Bernoulli family, which included important 17th and 18th century mathematicians such as Jacob Bernoulli, Johann Bernoulli and Daniel Bernoulli, were from Basel. The 18th century mathematician Leonhard Euler was born in Basel and studied under Johann Bernoulli. Intended as a defensive Huguenots then persecuted in France, Calvin's Institutes, authored in Basel, was a 1536 exposition of Protestant Christian doctrine which later became known as Calvinism. The first edition of Christiani Religionis Institutio was published at Basel in March 1536. In 1543, De Humani Corporis Fabrica, the first book on human anatomy, was published and printed in Basel by Andreas Vesalius. The 1648 Peace of Westphalia finally brought about imperial recognition of the independence of the Swiss cantons, removing the de jure overlordship of the Holy Roman Empire rejected by the then prince-bishopric nearly 150 years earlier. Unrest and insurrection. In 1792, the Raratian Republic, a revolutionary French client republic, was created, lasting for a few months into the following year before being partitioned between a restored Canton of Basel, later within the Helvetic Republic, and the First French Republic. Until 1830, Basel was a unified canton, with citizens from both the city and the municipalities of the countryside sitting in the canton's parliament. The cantonal parliament was dominated by members from the city, though its population was less than that of the combined countryside. This had not previously been a source of grievance, but in 1830 the Basel-Bieter, or citizens from the countryside, grew increasingly distrustful of the city. At a meeting in Bad Bubendorf on 18 October 1830, 25 Basel-Bieter wrote to the esteemed gentlemen and noblemen in Basel, demanding equal rights between city and countryside and a representation in parliament in proportion to the numbers. When the city rejected this demand, resentment from the countryside region grew still larger, to the extent that the city feared an attack. In Liestal, a few men of the countryside formed a new provincial government protected by an army of 3,000. The government was, however, short-lived as, on 16 January 1831, a force from Basel occupied Liestal, driving out the new government. A number of villages, such as Gelterkinden, Riegoldswil, Anwil and Bubendorf, remained loyal to Basel, though coming under threat from the rebels. The unrest in the countryside persisted into 1832, and both sides committed injustices upon the other. On 3 August 1833, over 1,200 troops of the city armed with 14 cannons marched on Liestal, but at the Battle of Half-cantons, which took place between Pratteln and Frankendorf, the city's troops were forced back to Basel by the superior numbers of the rebels. The route back to the city was ambushed and the city forces took heavy losses. Partition. After this conflict, the highest Swiss authority, the Tagsatzung, was petitioned on 17 August 1833 to separate the Canton of Basel. 9 days later, the partition into half-cantons, modelled after the precedent of Unterwalden and Appenzell, was effected. For the country municipalities it allocated only Rierhen, Bettingen and Kleinhunningen, which would otherwise have been an exclave of Basel-Country between Basel-City and the Grand Duchy of Baden, to the new half-canton of Basel-City. The remaining municipalities formed the new Canton of Basel-Country. The Swiss Constitution of 1844 continued to recognize Basel as one of 22 sovereign cantons of Switzerland, enumerated as Basel. In this sense, as a sovereign member of the Swiss Confederacy, the Canton of Basel continued to exist until 1999, when the revised constitution recognized the two former half-cantons as cantons for the first time. Suggested reunification. Several attempts have been made to reunite Basel-City and Basel-Country. In 1969, the citizens of Basel-Country defeated the motion in a referendum. The two cantons have since concluded a number of cooperation agreements, such as joint financing and governance of the University of Basel.